This is another YouTube video related to emotive energy. In this one, I will be discussing emotive energy and how it integrates with humanism, specifically the theoretical model of Abraham Maslow. The biggest problem in psychology is the theories are not integrated. They're just sort of scattered all over the place without hooks into each other. For example, Maslow's humanism and Skinner's behaviorism, no hooks between them. In fact, there was an argument between Carl Rogers and Skinner himself back in 1962, arguing for their different theories. But ultimately, it's just like comparing apples and oranges, and as a result, nothing conclusive was discovered. Additionally, the elephant in the room was Sigmund Freud's psychodynamic theory, and that was a completely different theoretical approach. So at that point in time, it's sort of comparing apples and oranges and avocados, maybe. So there was a mismatch, and it's been going on for years, decades. Now, there are many other theoretical models as well that should be integrated. And there is one approach called cognitive science, which is attempting to integrate. It's an interdisciplinary approach, but even that might not be pulling in all of the ideas that should be. So, all of these ideas and many more should be integrated. And emotive energy is an integrated model attempting to do that. For emotive energy, it focuses primarily on the central nervous system, even though fundamentally, at its basis, it's based in physics. For the central nervous system, the primary elements are the parasympathetic nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, and the somatic nervous system. The third part, the enteric nervous system, relates to digestion, and I defer to Dr. Michael Gershon's book, The Second Brain, where he pretty much covers all of the elements, but the enteric nervous system usually does not integrate with conscious thought and emotions, other than we will have visceral results if we're in the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. Now, trying to relate all of this to something that people are familiar with can be related to driving a car. The parasympathetic nervous system, basically, that's drive gear. You throw it in drive gear and you go after something. Sympathetic nervous system, well, that's reverse gear. You're trying to avoid something. So that's a very easy way to relate it. And finally, the somatic nervous system, that's your gas pedal. So you throw it into gear, reverse, or drive, and then you hit the gas pedal. Now, in the middle, the efficiency curve, that directly relates to emotions. And for the emotions, I'm relying on Robert Plutchik's his orange model, grapefruit model, citrus fruit model. And with that, there's what I call an emotional bowl. And it basically has on the left side there the positive emotions. We want to have love. We like being fascinated. We like having ecstasy. And on the right, the things that we don't want to have are rage and terror and sadness. So, again, this is a three-dimensional model. Okay, for today, for this video, I'm going to concentrate on Maslow's humanism. And this video will integrate humanism with the central nervous system. Now, the basis of Maslow's work is in his article in the Psychological Review, where it's entitled The Theory of Human Motivation. And it's from 1943, so it's been around for a long time. And what he states for his theoretical model is that human needs arrange themselves in hierarchies of prepotency, which is as clear as mud. And then he tries to explain that the appearance of one need usually rests on the prior satisfaction of another, more prepotent need. Again, his terminology is probably not the best. So let's get into something that makes a little more sense. His hierarchy of needs are typically and usually presented in a pyramid form. And for that, there are 5 levels, and they represent the 5 sets of goals, which may be called basic needs. And specifically, he's got physiological needs on the bottom, and those are to support and sustain life. And those are things like air, water, and food. The next level up is safety, and I've got the S using a dollar sign because most of these things we have to exchange money or barter for. And these are to protect life, and there are things like clothing and shelter, a home. The next level up would be love needs, which is really social support. It's not just one more relationship. It's more things such as family and friends, and it's more social needs. So people are involved now. The next level is esteem, which is not a real clear word, but esteem relates to confidence, and that is based on self. So self-confidence is important as well. Self-esteem, self-confidence, whichever you prefer. And then finally, he uses the term self-actualization. He admits that it's a term he borrowed from Kurt Goldstein. And basically, that's what's your star power? Where do you excel? What are you master over? Are you an artist, or are you an explorer? Maybe you're a champion, something else that you excel at. So this is more or less your potential of what you can be best at, what separates you from the crowd. Now, he calls these the hierarchies of prepotency. And he explains that a person who's lacking food, safety, love, and esteem, which are a bunch of the levels of the pyramid, would probably hunger for food more strongly than anything else. And food would be on the bottom level, the physiological level. So we work our way from the bottom to the top. And that is what he means by prepotency, that we've got to satisfy the lower levels before we can go to the upper levels. Now, he does admit that his theory is not the final state. This is not the ultimate end. And he says that it's basically a starting point for future research that needs to be or will be done in the future. So he admits that there's room for improvement, and that's what we're going to do here. So you take his pyramid. I don't believe pyramid is going to work very well for integrating with neuroscience. So let's modify that. First thing we need to do is cut it in half, turn it into a wedge. So there's a wedge, and it's color coded, and all those things that he talks about are still in the wedge: physiological needs, safety, love, esteem, self-actualization. And you can relate those. Physiological are sustaining life, safety, usually some resources are going to be involved, money usually, love, family, friends, and we'll use a heart to represent that. And the esteem, we want that to go up, of course, and self-actualization, that's your star power. Now, the priorities now are not top to bottom, bottom to top, they're left to right. So top priority is to the left. You've got to satisfy your physiological needs. You need to have air, water, and food, and then you can work your way to the right. So the ones to the right are lesser on the priority scale. All right, let's expand that wedge a little bit, give us a little more altitude. He calls them needs, But in reality, he also says there are at least 5 sets of goals called basic needs. So he relates a new term. Goals and needs are virtually the same for him. And it turns out he uses other terms as well. He uses drives and appetites, but most of all, he uses the term wants. And he says man is a perpetually wanting animal, and wants is probably a better term that we can relate to. Like, hey, I want a cookie. Hey, I want to fix my car. Hey, I want a new car. I want to buy a dress, or I want to buy a home. So wants are a much more flexible and usable term. All right, again, we have his 5 sets of needs, and we can call these wants. We want to satisfy physiological needs. We want to satisfy our safety needs. Want to have love, want to have esteem, want to become a star. So these are positive needs, and I've got a bowl of tomato soup from another video. So that's representing the basic bottom level or top level, whichever you prefer. It's the leftmost level of physiological needs. Now, these are our needs for what we want, but there are some things we don't want, like a bucket of swill filled with germs. So for those wants, there's a counterpart of exact opposites. These are things we don't want. If we want life, we don't want death. If we want money, we don't want poverty. If we want love, we don't want a broken heart. If we want our esteem to go up and confidence, we don't want confidence to go down. And finally, we do not want our star to fade away. So this is a counterpart that's not clearly defined or looked at by Maslow in his original paper. And usually when you see the pyramid, they conveniently do not address something that is obvious, that for every want, there's an opposite of something we don't want. All right, so the opposites are in there. And if we cut out a little bit, make the pyramids, the wedges into more of a curly Q or curved state, the ideas are still there: life versus death, money versus poverty, love versus a broken heart. All of those do correlate on either side. They're opposites. So the wants are things that we seek, and the don't wants, those are things that we avoid. In classic psychology, the terms are approach and avoid. But approach does not imply that we know whether we want it or not. So I don't think that's the best term. Food, air, and water, we know we want, we seek that. So rather than approach and avoid, I prefer seek and avoid, which is clearer and more obvious. There are some things that we seek, and the opposites are things that we avoid. If we put curves in there to represent the two sides, suddenly there is a way to directly correlate it with the emotive energy diagram. And of course, this is color coded as well. So the green represents the parasympathetic nervous system. The red represents the sympathetic nervous system. But over on the want side, that's the wedge that was created earlier in this YouTube video. Represents food, sustenance on the left. And on the parasympathetic nervous system, again, those are our wants. These are things that we seek. On the other side, the opposite of our wants, things we don't want. And these are things like swill and disease, anything that'll harm us or worse, kill us. And anything that's a threat, it invokes the sympathetic nervous system. And that is indicative of avoiding things. So we have seek and avoid. And that creates a value scale. Seek and want on the left, avoid and don't want on the right. And those wedges are in there, so that directly correlates with Maslow's original pyramid. Now, if we take all those pieces and reorient them, the question that might come to mind, first of all, let me make sure that we're all on the same page here. I'm using the symbolic icons or indicators, glyphs. And down on the don't want, we don't want our star to fade. We don't want our esteem to go down. We don't want to have a broken heart. We don't want poverty. And we certainly don't want to die. So those are all in the same relationship as in the earlier diagrams. So the gap is what is important now. So what's in the gap? Well, these are things that we neither want or don't want. Here we've got some clouds floating overhead. And let's say those clouds are over Point Nemo in the Pacific Ocean. They're over someplace far away from all of us. So we really don't care about the clouds at Point Nemo or in the middle of the Pacific. And that's what this circle means, is there's part of that scale from want to don't want. There's an area of things that just don't matter to us. We neither want or don't want. And it could be like, how much was the price of shoes 50 years ago? Who cares? I want to know how much they cost now because I need some new shoes. And what did you have for dinner on March 3rd of 2010? Oh, that was over a decade ago. I don't care what I was eating back then. I don't care. So that's the part that of this want scale, if you will, that it explains why there's a gap between the positives, the wants, and the negatives of don't want. All right, in summary, for humanism, it's started primarily with Abraham Maslow, and he said needs arrange themselves in hierarchies of prepotency. Not a clear term, but we've got to live with it. So his needs are usually in a pyramid, and that makes it really awkward to relate to neuroscience. So we're going to break his pyramid and take a wedge of that. And those are his various needs: physiological, and that sustains life; safety, that protects life; love, those are people needs; esteem, confidence; and finally our star power. And the priorities now with this modified version is from left to right. The top priority is to the far left, and then it moves downward to the right. In the end, there are things we want and things we don't want. And they're basically things that we seek and things that we avoid. Now, if we turn those wedges and give them sort of a curve, suddenly this directly correlates with the emotive energy diagram, which relates this all to the central nervous system. So here we have want and don't want. On the left, the parasympathetic nervous system. On the right, the sympathetic nervous system. So parasympathetic, what we want, we seek; what we don't want, we avoid. And that creates a scale of things that are positive that we seek to the left, stuff we avoid, negative, to the right. In the middle, it's dark there. That's the area that is not clear, and it's neutral, and stuff that really doesn't matter. And all of this can directly relate to driving a car. Parasympathetic nervous system, usually termed rest and digest, and it called these are things that we seek. It's drive gear. The opposite, pulls in with the sympathetic nervous system. It's called fight or flight. These are things that we avoid, things that we don't want, related to the idea of reverse gear. You back away from that stuff, or you swerve around it. It's avoidance, basically. So you have drive gear and swerve gear. And finally, you've got the gas pedal in a car, and that's the somatic nervous system. So you put it in gear, and then you hit the gas. Now, in the middle is the emotional bowl, if you will, and I relate this to the orange model of Robert Plutchik. And with that, you have things on the left that you like, those feelings that you want to reproduce, and feelings on the right you don't. So the left feel good, right feel bad. And that again is Robert Plutchik's model. And it also relates to Harold Schlossberg, but that will be dealt with in a different video. Now, all of this can be found in the Reignite Your Creativity model, written by me and Dr. Kailash Jaitley. Dr. Jaitley was former head of a psychiatric hospital and later head of the psychology department at a graduate university. And our book is, I believe, 2013. And those are I apologize. Those are the ways you can find the book. They're on Amazon.com, both as a paperback and as an ebook.